Welcome to While We Were Distracted, the podcast where we explore topics that often get overshadowed in the rush of daily life. Please take a moment to like and subscribe. It really helps.
So, back on September 19th, 2025, employers, across the U.S., got this massive shock. A presidential proclamation suddenly slapped a $100,000 fee onto the H-1B skilled worker visa, the one everyone relies on.
Yeah, $100,000 out of almost nowhere.
The cost and honestly the confusion, it was immediate, just overwhelming.
You can imagine.
So our mission today is really to cut through all that noise. We're going to take a hard look at the guidance that U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, USCIS, finally released on October 20th.
Guidance everyone was waiting for.
Exactly. This document finally sort of drew a line in the sand. It clarified exactly who gets hit with that six-figure charge and, crucially, who's safe, who's exempt.
And to really get the weight of this clarification, you have to remember what it replaced.
Right.
I mean, historically, H-1B fees, they might range from, $2,000 to maybe $5,000, depending on the company size. Pretty manageable.
Standard cost of business for many.
Totally. So when the administration announced this massive hike, saying it was to address abuse of the program, well, it didn't just blow up budgets.
Yeah.
It forced this immediate, almost existential rethink of every international recruiting plan in the country.
I bet.
And the biggest question, the one we heard for weeks, was just, does this massive fee apply to the talent we already have here in the U.S.?
That's the crucial point, isn't it? If you're an employer, the sticker shock is bad, but your number one worry is losing the essential people already working for you.
Exactly. Mass attrition.
So, okay, let's unpack this guidance. It offered a pretty distinct split, right? Where did USCIS draw the line? Where's the relief?
Okay, so they drew a really clear line.
Yeah.
It's basically based on location and immigration status.
Location and status.
Right. The central point, the most beneficial clarification for many, is that the $100,000 fee primarily targets new petitions, specifically for beneficiaries who are outside the United States and don't currently have a valid H-1B visa.
Okay, so if you're hiring someone completely fresh, maybe from an international university overseas, or bringing someone from, say, your London office.
That's when the $100,000 fee kicks in.
Yeah.
That's the price of entry, basically, for bringing them over.
But the real relief, the thing employers were really pushing for, that came for the people already in the pipeline here, domestically.
Absolutely. The guidance spells it out quite clearly. The fee does not apply if a foreign worker is requesting an amendment to their current status, an extension of stay, or, and this is the big one, a change of status.
A change of status.
While they're inside the United States, that physical location is key.
Okay, that change of status exemption, that sounds like a lifeline. Especially, I imagine, for tech companies and universities. Just to be super clear for everyone listening, we're talking about folks who are maybe here on an F1 student visa, right? The standard student status.
That's the most common scenario, yes.
And they're trying to transition into the H-1B work status? Is that the core group?
That's exactly right. So, say you're a recent grad, maybe engineering. You're probably here on that F1 visa.
Yeah.
Your employer sponsors you for an H-1B.
Right.
They file for a change of status from F1 to H-1B. As long as you physically stay in the U.S. while that's processing,
You avoid the fee.
you avoid the $100,000 fee. It's now explicitly exempt.
Mm-hmm.
And this is huge, especially when you look at the numbers. International students make up something like 73% of full-time grad students in electrical and computer engineering.
73%, wow.
Yeah. So without this exemption, you basically cripple U.S. science and tech leadership overnight. You'd be exporting the talent we just educated.
That statistic really highlights it. It shows why USCIS probably had to create this carve-out, doesn't it? It stops the U.S. from kicking out its best educated grads right after they finish their degrees. And the guidance also confirms something else important, right? About current H-1B holders, people who got their visa before the rule change, before September 21st.
Yes, good point. It confirmed that those existing H-1B holders are exempt when they file for renewals.
Okay, phew.
And importantly, they're not blocked from routine travel. They can still go in and out of the country without triggering the fee for their renewal.
So stability for the existing H-1B workforce, that seems clear.
Right. It looks like the goal of the guidance was really to minimize disruption for people already established here domestically, while still putting up that very significant and obviously controversial barrier for new international recruitment.
It definitely sets up this fascinating, maybe fraught, two-tier system. Okay, so we've covered who's safe if they stay put. Now, let's flip to the other side. Who does face this six-figure price tag, and how does this guidance create like a minefield around travel, even for people already here.
Yeah, this is where the technical details get really critical. The $100,000 fee is mandatory in basically three main scenarios.
Okay.
First, as we said, any new H-1B petition for a worker who is physically outside the U.S., that's your standard international recruitment, often called consular processing, fee applies.
Right, makes sense. That lines up with the idea of taxing recruitment from abroad. What's the second scenario? The travel risk one.
This is the minefield part, like you said. Even if the worker is inside the U.S. when applying for the H-1B,
Okay.
the fee still applies if the petition itself requests certain travel-related notifications, specifically things like consular notification, port of entry notification, or pre-flight inspection.
Hold on. Why would just requesting a notification suddenly cost $100,000? What's the logic there? What's the difference?
It seems purely administrative, but yeah, with huge financial consequences. See, when you file for that change of status we talked about, like F1 to H-1B,
Yeah.
you're asking the government, change my status while I'm right here. But if you request consular notification, you're basically telling USCIS, hey, I plan to leave the country later and get my actual H-1B visa stamp at a U.S. embassy or consulate abroad.
Ah, okay.
By signaling you intend to use that consular process, the pathway really designed for people outside the U.S., you trigger the fee, even if you're inside the U.S. when you file.
Wow. So let's say a company sponsors an F1 student. They file for the change of status. Looks like no fee. But then the employee needs to fly home quickly, maybe of a family emergency or just a holiday, before the H-1B is fully approved. Does that act of leaving, or even just signaling you might leave by asking for consular notification, does that immediately put them in the fee category?
Pretty much, yes. That leads right into the third scenario the guidance outlines. The fee applies if USCIS decides the person isn't actually eligible for a change of status. Maybe they accidentally fell out of their F1 status or something.
Okay.
Or, crucially, if they depart the U.S. prior to the final decision on their petition. If the applicant leaves before it's approved, the petition automatically converts to an international application, the consular processing route,
Yeah.
and boom, $100,000 fee applies.
So it's a massive deterrent to any international travel for someone waiting on that first H-1B approval inside the U.S.
Exactly. It effectively traps them here until the status is fully resolved, unless the employer is suddenly willing to pony up that six-figure sum.
Wow, okay. And just quickly, the logistics, how does the payment actually work? Is it just part of the regular filing fees?
No, it's separate. The guidance made that clear. The $100,000 payment has to be submitted separately using the government's online portal, pay.gov.
Pay.gov. Oh,
And you have to do it before you even submit the H-1B application itself. You need proof of that payment to include in your H-1B filing packet.
got it. So technically clear on the process, but it definitely doesn't quiet the storm about the legality of the fee itself, does it? The opposition was immediate.
Oh, absolutely not. The opposition was broad, loud, and fast. Critics immediately called it, President Trump's most disruptive move yet, targeting high-skilled foreign workers.
And there are lawsuits, right? Two big ones.
Yeah, two high-profile legal challenges popped up almost instantly. The first one came in early October. It was filed by this really diverse coalition. You had healthcare providers, labor unions, schools, even religious employers, all joining forces.
That's quite a mix. It really shows the widespread impact, doesn't it, across different industries.
Exactly. It wasn't just tech complaining. And then the second major suit, this one was filed just 4 days before the USCIS guidance actually came out, on October 16th. That one was from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce.
Okay. And what's the core argument in these lawsuits? What are they claiming?
The central legal argument is pretty much identical in both suits. They're arguing that the administration is trying to unilaterally impose this massive financial barrier on immigration without getting authority from Congress.
The separation of powers argument. That makes sense.
Right. They're essentially saying fees this huge, fees that fundamentally change immigration pathways and impact commerce so drastically, require an act of Congress, not just a presidential proclamation.
So they're framing it less as a fee and more as an unauthorized tax designed to restrict immigration, which Congress should control.
That's the heart of it. It raises this really profound legal question about just how far executive authority can go in immigration policy. The plaintiffs argue Congress has to specifically authorize these kinds of user fees, especially ones that could, as they put it, wreak havoc on entire sectors that rely on specialized global talent. The courts are going to have to decide, is this a legitimate fee or is it an end run around Congress?
A huge legal battle brewing there. But, okay, besides the courts, the original proclamation did mention one possible way out, right? An administrative path. a national interest exception.
It did.
The Secretary of Homeland Security could supposedly grant an exception if the worker was deemed crucial to the national interest. Did the USCIS guidance make that like a realistic option for employers?
No, they absolutely did not make it realistic. While the proclamation language sounded potentially open,
Sounded hopeful.
maybe a little, but the USCIS guidance slammed the door shut pretty hard. They immediately inserted this really restrictive language. They stated point blank that this exception is reserved for the extraordinarily rare circumstance.
Extraordinarily rare.
That's government speak for don't even bother asking, isn't it? Pretty much. And they said employers have to meet a high threshold. The burden of proof is intense.
How high? What do you have to prove?
You have to prove two things at the same time. First, that no American worker is available to fill the role, which is already a very high bar to clear, legally speaking.
Okay, standard but tough. And the second thing?
And second, you also have to prove that forcing you to pay the $100,000 would significantly undermine the interests of the United States.
Wow. So not just inconvenient, not just expensive, but actively harmful to the U.S.
Exactly. This isn't your average waiver request. It's a standard basically reserved for like truly exceptional cases of major strategic national importance. Think, critical defense projects or something on that scale, not your typical H-1B hire.
Okay, well, this deep dive has certainly brought the technical clarity that employers were waiting weeks for, even if the news isn't all good. Let's try and sum up the main takeaway for you, the listener. We need to synthesize both the clarity and, well, the ongoing controversy.
Right. So what does this all really mean? Bottom line. The guidance created this official, though still very controversial, two-tier system.
Tier 1.
Tier 1.
Yeah.
If you're applying for a brand new H-1B from outside the country, or if you're inside but you need to use consular processing or signal you intend to travel before approval, get ready for that six-figure barrier. It applies.
And Tier 2.
Tier 2. If you are already here in the U.S., especially if you're navigating that F1 student to H-1B path, you can likely avoid that immediate financial hit. The key is using the change of status provision and, critically, staying put in the U.S. until your petition is fully approved.
So the guidance gives stability, or at least predictability, for the high-skilled workers already here, but it keeps that incredibly expensive wall up for new international recruitment. Makes the U.S. a much pricier place for employers looking overseas.
Exactly. The clarity is helpful on an administrative level, sure, but the legal fight, the economic barrier, those are still very much alive and kicking.
And, that leaves us with a final, maybe provocative thought for you to chew on. Given that U.S. universities are these huge pipelines for high-skilled talent.
Especially in STEM.
Right. And the H-1B program already has annual caps, right? 65,000 general plus 20,000 for U.S. advanced degrees. How might this new fee structure change the game in global competition for talent?
Interesting question.
Specifically, what incentive does this give U.S. grad schools now? Could they ramp up recruiting international students even more, knowing those students are now a significantly cheaper, less risky path to an H-1B for employers compared to hiring someone directly from abroad?
It could create a really complex dynamic, couldn't it? Between education policy, recruitment strategies, and immigration economics. Definitely something to watch.
A lot to consider there. We encourage you to think about that bigger picture.
Well, thank you for joining us for this discussion.
Don't forget to like and subscribe for the next episode on While We Were Distracted.